Hey everyone, welcome back to Make Music. Today we have another interview. We got Tyler Mays on here. He's a recording engineer, producer, mixer, instrumentalist from Seattle, Washington. You can go ahead and introduce yourself, give a little bit of a Wikipedia-like summary of who you are and what you do. So,
I love it. Yeah. Yeah, I'm Tyler. I'm from the Seattle area. I'm actually a native to this area too, which I don't think everyone that does music around here often says that. Uh, one of the first bands I started working with a few years ago, they actually said, "Oh, you're a unicorn." I'm like a what? They say, "Oh, you're someone that's doing music here that's actually from here." So kind of fun little
right.
side, thing beside the
Yeah.
point. But yeah, I got into music at an early age and honestly, like, played a pretty big variety of instruments and had different kinds of experiences from like jazz to classical to starting a band with my brother and stuff, and kind of uh, all that led me actually to recording and mixing and engineering at one point. So that was probably, I'd say like in junior high. So probably at least like 16 or 17 years ago now, I picked up recording in some form, like, very small interface and a laptop just to make
Mhm.
demos for my band at the time. But uh, through the years of playing in bands and kind of doing that route, the production and recording thing always kind of stuck. And then, uh, yeah, I've been doing it more professionally now for about, I'd say like 6 years or so, since around 2018 or thereabout. And it was just kind of a natural evolution, really, of, I think, the bands and stuff I was in. We were like, okay, we kind of got some opportunities to tour and do the thing and like kind of pursue that dream, but we all kind of knew it wasn't the thing we wanted to do long term. And I had already had recording kind of on the side. It's just like a side thing that friends of friends would ask me to record them, and it just kind of made sense for me. Like, I really enjoyed it. People liked the work I was doing, so it kind of made sense for me to push into that more and lean into it. So it's kind
It
of
always, yeah, it
what
always
got me
kind of
into it. Yeah.
snowballs. You don't go out like, all right, time to become like a pro mixer. Like it's just kind of develops, as you
No,
go.
yeah.
And you're also in a band, right? Tell people about your band too, because your
Right.
music's
Yeah.
awesome.
So I still am in a band. It's called Becoming Bristol, and we're all from the Seattle area too. So we're kind of like the rebranding of our old band that was called The Exchange, that we toured back when I was in college and stuff. But kind of with the rebranding came more of a bit of a stylistic adjustment too. And I think also uh, we really want to make good music that we like, rather than for the sake of the art, rather than necessarily trying to do a band as a career.
Sure.
So in some ways, I think it's like freed us up to enjoy it more and enjoy the process of making music on
Yeah.
our own terms. But so I'm the
And
bass player. I sing a little backup vocals sometimes, and I'm not the main songwriter. Honestly, our singer Britt is like the main songwriter most of the time, but we all definitely add our pieces, and we kind of like co-produce it too in some ways. So like, he has a setup at his house. He'll record vocals, and
mm,
honestly, I appreciate that because it makes my life and investment in the band, while producing other artists, more manageable.
yeah.
So
Do you
yeah,
mix and master all the material?
I mix it. I've mastered like a couple things we've done, but generally, I have a good friend in California, Olaf, that's mastered our stuff recently, and it's that decision is more, I think, just that I've been more involved in the song for longer, so I
Sure.
prefer to let
Did
someone
it?
else make the final call. Although I love mastering, and it's actually one of my favorite parts of production, and kind of
Yeah. Same.
something I've been like leaning more into. So
Yeah. Well, all the Becoming Bristol stuff sounds incredible. So whatever you guys are doing is great. I
appreciate that.
just had it pulled up earlier, and I was like, yeah, this is all really really solid. I mean, all your material you work on, but that stuff sounds great too.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sometimes it's good to have a second pair of ears on anything, just to make sure y'all aren't crazy on a different page or
Yeah.
different plan. So, um, yeah. So why don't you tell us a little bit about just how you kind of got into recording, why you record the genres you do record, and
Mm,
how just how you sort of developed your skills along the way. You went a little bit into that, but just kind of how you got to the point where you're at with this
Right.
craft.
Right. Yeah. Well, for one, a lot of time has elapsed. So that's the thing to always keep in mind, I think, with a lot of life skills is, time. You have time on your side, and anyone that reaches like what you perceive as a high level has probably been doing it for a while and had some rough beginnings. So let's see. I think kind of said it a little bit how I got into recording. So it was actually my first band, like before I met the guys that I still play with. I had another band where one of our band members was taking some recording classes, and he was showing me some stuff, and I was just super intrigued. I started trying to learn myself with like Audacity, and this was like 2007, Audacity and like one microphone, and it was pretty terrible. And but I think just slowly taking advice from even him. Like he showed me, like on my very first mix, I remember I tried to mix the same song as my old bandmate, and I didn't know that, like, oh, if you mic a snare drum on a top and bottom, you have to flip the phase of one, or else it's going to sound like really bad. So even things like that, like just learning essentials. I never went to school for audio. I did study music my freshman year of college, then switched to business. I just bailed on music education in the formal sense. But yeah, so most of my teaching was through books at the library. I definitely picked up a ton of library books, found early content on YouTube, like back when I think Graham Cochran's Recording Revolution.
I love, all right, hold on. I love recording.
The only game in town, or one of the few out there.
He doesn't do content anymore, but that's one of the first channels I landed on. Yeah, great resource there. Anyways, that's one of my favorites.
Totally. So. Yeah, that was the early beginnings, I think. And then, staying plugged into people making content on YouTube and listening to podcasts. Later on, of course, I found people like Warren Hewart on Produce Like a Pro, and I was involved in Nail the Mix URM stuff for a while. Jordan Valeriot stuff was also a big help, even though I wasn't going into I never had the goal to be in heavy music specifically. I've actually pulled a lot from the heavy music content out there too, because there's I think they're making some of the best content and education, at least at the time. Yeah. I know we've kind of it's been a few years since I was really into the Nail the Mix, Joey Sturgis kind of education. Right. Their stuff was really the top at the time.
Like in early 2010s, there just was not a lot of anything really for recording. Like it was all very, very new. And then I think the first stuff that kind of really exploded was kind of like the metal recording education. And that's kind of defined the space, I think, for a while. I think finally other genres are catching up to that. Like you do more alternative rock and 2000s style rock music, right? Would that be a good way to characterize your music? It's modern too, but also takes some inspiration.
Yeah, a lot of that. I don't know if I've really been boxed into a specific lane as a producer for genres. I definitely say I focus on rock and rock adjacent genres, but I've had some fun opportunities to work on almost any kind of music, which I won't have to explain all of it, but anything from hip hop to opera singers I've done, and I've done repeatedly for some of the same people, which is fun. But as far as what I feel like I'm most competent, what most naturally I have a good taste and experience for is the rock and rock oriented stuff. And that in itself is such a huge variety of sounds. I do think that metal is and heavier genres are part of that too. So
sure.
Yeah. But as far as you did ask a good question about how did I decide or get into the kinds of music I'm making. And I think a lot of that was kind of naturally because I was playing rock and alternative kind of pop rock, stuff with my band at the time when I, kicked off doing this for a few people. That's the kind of music I naturally had connections in with other bands.
Sure.
And it's what I felt like I had an ear for. I had something to some opinions about it, some passion about it. So
Right. Yeah.
that's kind of why I, it's a funny thing. Sometimes I feel like your lane chooses you and you don't choose it. But at this point, like, I'm sure I could do a good job at any other genres if I wanted, but I'm not going to, like, unless there's just a ripe opportunity I really want to do. I think I'm mostly focused on, like, the rock kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, I feel it's great that you keep the variety open, because I feel like a lot of producers, they get kind of pigeonholed into one thing because they're really good at it, and then they can get burnt out really quick. So I think keeping the variety probably helps you keep learning, and then keeps you interested. It's like, oh, I've just done a heavy thing, but now I'm going to do like a R&B thing. So it's just like kind of really helps keep things fresh. And I wonder if you agree with this, because it's something I've seen. Just the amount of education for recording and mixing, it seems to be modern metal, there's like this much, and then for everything else, and then maybe hip hop too, and then for everything else, there's just like barely any. And that's like a discrepancy I saw on YouTube that I have been trying to fill, because it just seems like everything is tailored towards either like hip hop or modern metal. And then like for alternative or rock or anything indie, it's just like very little information. I wonder if you agree with that.
I see where you're coming from. I think maybe, like, you also have to keep in mind our internet algorithms always are, they're trying to, like, tailor the content that gets pushed to us, even like towards what they know we've been interested in or what we've, like, searched and stuff. But all the stuff I can think of, it's like you have the heavy music lane, then you have the real pop and hip hop, like, beat maker kind of oriented stuff, like towards the kids that want to make beats, and like, here, get this sample pack, try this MIDI chord pack. I get those ads all the time. And there's, like, Austin Hull doing his make pop music thing, which is really, really awesome.
Yes, great channel.
And I think maybe some of that stems from, so you think of, like, the heavy music metalcore, like Joey Sturgis Forum culture, that that type of music got big, and it was kind of like, it didn't come from record label execs or like major label stuff. It came from, like, grassroots, like a movement around, like, the MySpace World Tour scene kind of bands. Like, that style of music and production was being done by guys kind of in their living room with a laptop. So it almost makes sense that maybe more education for that would sprout up organically, because it's the kind of thing that people learned, oh, I can do this kind of record in my living room or my basement. And then I think same thing with, like, hip hop. Anyone can make beats on a laptop. You don't need $1 million studio. And maybe it's the kind of other music, like a little more organic rock or like live band instrumentation. Maybe the stuff for online education fell by the wayside for that, because that type of music is probably traditionally done in a little more of, like, a big studio environment. And so maybe the fact that, like, the production methods weren't low budget and accessible for, the average Joe, a hunch.
Yeah, no, I guess that's a factor I never considered, but I do think you're right. Like, some of that, just the live band playing a little more live does sort of lend itself to that genre. I do wish that metal music today kind of returned a little bit to that, because we're kind of stuck, I think, a little bit in the loop of everything sounding the same. I get some unpopular opinions about that, because I kind of rave against, I think modern metal production has really been kind of stuck the last 7 or 8 years, because all the education has kind of been, like, homogenous to a degree. But I do think you're right. Like, a modern rock album just sounds better when people are playing in a room and vibing off each other. And then, like, when you need modern metal and a kick drum needs to sound like a machine gun, like, it's just a different form of production. So I definitely understand that a little bit. But I personally feel like there's just a discrepancy, and I can never figure out why. Maybe it has to do with the perceived what genres people think are cool or whatever, or maybe are difficult to produce too. I mean, modern metal is also very difficult to produce as well. So I don't know. It's something that has just slowly bothered me over time, and I just want to see more variety, I guess, when it comes to instructions. So I don't know if you have any further comments on that, but
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fair. Um, yeah, it's funny. I hadn't really thought of that before. Like, why is there, it seems like there's less education about that, about
Yeah.
the rock bands or the organic instrumentation. Yeah, I don't know. It's probably just, like I said, I think it has to do with how much, the kind of people making the certain kinds of music people are making at home generally, or trying to.
Yeah. No, I think you're right about that. So like when you go to record people or you're recording a project, what's some of the very common pitfalls you see when musicians come in to track their songs in terms of like them not being able to perform the parts or the songs not being ready? What's some of the things where you just go, oh no, not this? And what do you think people could
Right.
do to really be prepared for when they start recording? I'm sure you've got a number of things on that list.
Cool. Yeah. Let's see. So there's some basic things like lyrics. Lyrics and a vocal melody, I think, is big.
Elaborate.
Some people are just
Curious
revisionists
about the lyrics.
down to the last minute. Yeah.
Okay, sure.
Well, I remember having a band that we had the instrumental done, and it was time for lyrics. I think it was like day 2 or 3 of recording song, and we were getting down to about time to start doing vocals, and they're like, oh, we all got to go outside and have a meeting or whatever, and they're just like trying to come up with a few lines still outside. I think maybe okay, yeah, well, honestly, maybe I'll say kind of like what I try and do to get around that too. Since that session, that was years ago, I have a lot more elaborate pre-production process and like, prep I'll go through an artist with to really want to hear what they have and like hear a demo and stuff and talk about it. But I don't know why, maybe people, I'm personally not much like a huge lyric writer. So I know everyone has a different message and like, goal for their, like what they want to communicate with their songs. So it probably, the reasons why someone would procrastinate or not have lyrics done could be as varied as the topics of songs that they would write. But I think, okay, as far as like having the song prepped, commonly I think intros can be too long, and interludes, instrumentals. Sometimes there needs, like, if like this goes into also pre-production, but if every part you have, like every chorus that hits has the exact same vocal melody and exact same parts, generally that gets to be a little too static for most songs. So I think people can think about, hey, is every part of this song fresh? Like, is there something new happening, like a new guitar line in the third chorus that you haven't heard in the first 2, or kind of like ear candy? And obviously, like if it's a 4-person rock band and you're going to get in the studio and we're going to do more overdubs, maybe you haven't rehearsed all those like extra parts, but at least like have some ideas coming in. So that's one thing that I'm finding is like, oh, we just need to add and like kind of add a little more spice to this before we get in the studio. So just thinking about those kinds of things. And then I would also say a huge one for playing in the studio and like having your parts prepared is note length. So many times I think when bands get to play live, like if you're rehearsing for a live show, I feel like there's a certain bar of, oh, it's good and it's ready, where maybe you're hearing 70% of the detail of what's going on. And it sounds good enough in your practice room. So you play it live and everyone's like, great job. Yeah. And then you don't know, by the time you get to the studio, you haven't realized that, like, hey, maybe that lead guitarist is like not holding the notes like to the end of the bar when it would sound best to do that, or they're cutting off this or that. So I think note length in the studio is a really huge one. And
that's gold, because
yeah,
it's like, yeah, bands will practice live and that's a vibe, but you can also play sloppier. And then when you get to a studio environment and things need to be on a, in time, in tune, muting strings that aren't being played. It can really go. So you thought that you played that
Muting,
part
yes.
well, but then you realized that you don't actually play that part well. So I mean, have you had challenges where a guitarist is like, "All right, I'm ready to record this thing." They record it, and you're like, "Oh boy, we're gonna have to spend an hour, playing each note individually because this is just not right."
Yeah. Yeah, that kind of thing is pretty common with guitar and bass sometimes, but yeah, and it's like you said, they just either don't realize that some other strings are ringing out that are muddying it up, or maybe that their articulation is really not consistent from part to part when it needs to be. And yeah, one common remedy and thing I do a lot with guitar, whether it's holding it with my hand or having like their buddy bandmate hold it, or tying a cloth or something around strings, using tape, toilet paper. There's all kinds of tricks, but that's a big one.
Yes.
And then also, obviously, like this goes for instruments, but setup and intonation of your instrument. Like if things aren't in tune as you play up the neck.
Oh my God.
So I've by necessity I've de facto become a guitar setup person for a lot of people I work with.
You have to, right? I mean, like,
Yeah.
you just learn. You have to at some point, because
Yeah.
poor intonation, I mean, makes a recording useless. It's like, great, you played it right. It's like 2 cents sharp on this entire part. We're gonna have to redo that. So, or string gauges being wrong is another. When they bend the string or whatever, or even just like
For sure.
pickup selection. Or even guitar selection. It's like you want a heavy sound, but you're going to play a Squire. It's like, that even plays a lot into the, what the final sound's going to be.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. Sound selection at the source. And and the sound that you had live may not be the one for the track when we get it in here and like see how parts are sitting together. And so, I try and I try and really communicate with artists that, hey, like show me what your sound that you have, and like we'll see it, if that's a good fit, or if not, like we might play with some more things. And fortunately, most people are pretty flexible and easygoing with things like tones. Like I always record a DI. Like if I, almost like 99% of the time I'm getting a DI now. I kind of built myself a system to do it quickly and not really think about it. So it's good to do.
Especially because if something has too much gain, or has just a wonky EQ curve or like a random effect on it, and you don't have the ability to change that later, it will ruin the sound. You will have to retrack it. And I think people who come in, they're very surprised, like, especially you track parts with way less gain than they think you should. It's like you almost want to dial back maybe 2 notches on your amp more than you think you should play with it. So I think that kind of shocks people a lot. Even, do you mic up guitars in your studio with cabs? And
I do sometimes. I used to more, since I got a load box and have been using IRs with that. So like most of the time I'm using my amp heads and then a load box, and
sure,
I have a bunch of IRs loaded into just like a more IR loader pedal. I can almost pull it into the shot here.
Yeah. No, I mean,
This
ton of
guy.
people are using it. Yeah. It's just so much more quieter, economical.
Yeah, I found, or I'll use amp sims for the part. It really depends, but I like to go to my amps that I know first, typically. But if someone has a really great sound dialed in that they bring, like for instance, for Becoming Bristol, for my band stuff, the last 2 songs we tracked, we used mostly Kemper sounds that Manny and Britt had built at home on their each individual Kemper rigs already. And so and they sounded great. And I was like, this is the right sound for the part. So let's do it. And like, I don't have really you can't have an ego about the kind of gear that was made to make a sound, like how much it cost or whether it was an emulation or a real tube amp. But I think you just got to find a vibe that works for the song. And that's also it's almost like everything. When it comes to tones, I feel like it's not about how it sounds in solo. It's about how it fits into the track. Does it fit in
Right.
like a glove? And if not, you just keep tweaking until you find something that locks in. And that's hard to know at first. Sometimes you just have to get a good sound and build it from there. But through the years of doing this, eventually I've kind of gotten more of an ear for when something's just going to fit. And it gets more fun the longer you do it, because it's kind of like, oh, that tone quest almost gets shorter rather than longer. Hopefully, if you're getting if you're improving your skills and your ear and your taste, my taste for something that's going to sit in the song is going to be different than someone else's taste, and that's okay.
Well,
But if you can find the taste that you like, your tone quest should get shorter and not longer, I think.
Yeah. Oh, I love the 4 amp heads you got over those. A great selection. Is that 6505 PV? I can't quite tell.
Yeah, it's just the 6505.
And then we got a JCM Marshall
JVM that actually belongs to my singer Britt, but he lets me use it.
Oh, okay. And then the Mesa and then the Fender. I mean, you got pretty much everything covered between those 4 amp heads. Yeah. For me, it's like
a good set to have.
It's like I love I'm just a Marshall guy. I love Marshall sounds. That's what works for me. But like other people, they love Mesas. I think Mesas sound like trash through a trash can and then through a trash compactor. But for some people, it works perfect. Right? So it just depends. And great bands have used Mesas. A ton of great bands have used Mesas. So it's just a lot of personal taste. But you also got to leave the ego at the door. Like when I track stuff with Sight Received, I honestly don't care. I'm just like, whatever works with the song, that should be your attitude, for sure. But I feel like there's less sort of egotistical guitar players now that there's plugins and things. They're less attached to like, I need to use this with that. So I think that kind of helps a little bit maybe with that process.
Yeah.
When it comes to like, what are some of your tips when it comes to you tracking vocalists? Because I feel like this is the most difficult thing for people to get down. There's a lot of nuance to this. There's a lot of like getting the vibe right for the singer.
Oh, yeah.
What are your things that you've come across where it's like, this helps me get the best performance? Just what are some of the things you've learned?
Yeah. Okay. So I feel like a lot of the success and magic is in the prep, and so this is not even just for vocals, but in a lot of things, producing and engineering wise. So there's an old saying or story, something about, is it Abe Lincoln he was like a lumberjack or whatever, he was gonna, or some lumberjack had a story, classic figure that, I was gonna go, and I had 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I went and I had 5. I spent like 5 hours going really hard, and I noticed I was like only halfway done. And then meanwhile, the guy that was really experienced came out and had already like chopped down several trees in that time. And they said, what's your difference? And he says, you spent 5 hours hacking away at that tree. I spent 5 hours sharpening my axe, and now I can like chop down all the trees I want. And I try and have that mentality with a lot of things. But okay, going back to vocals, making sure the headphones actually work, for one, that it sounds good, that it's a good level. That if your headphone wires and headphone cables short out all the time, they get halfway unplugged. If you don't actually like go in the booth or wherever you have them set up and check that the singer's going to hear it, then like I've had people record before and I didn't know that their wire was shorting out. And if it's someone that's not super tech savvy or has bad hearing, they may not know that they're missing half the signal. So
right, or that weird position where like the cables makes it out of phase sounding, where it's like half.
Like it might cancel the center, but all they get is reverb and guitars on the sides. Making sure that that they're comfortable, for one, in the prep, making sure they can hear what they need to. Like I actually always use the same ear mix. Like I link my headphone mix to whatever the singer or someone I'm tracking is generally. So I know exactly the mix that they're getting. I don't like set up. This is like counterintuitive maybe from how big name studios have their rigs set up, but I don't let people make their own mix. I'm always aware of what mix they're getting.
Smart.
And so I can kind of like know when they're asking for more of something or less, I kind of like can know why and say verify. Okay, then I know if like I have the vocal cranked and they're like, I can't hear myself. I know something else is off and I need to like check their headphones.
Right. Yeah, don't let
So
people build their own mixes because they're not gonna do it right. I don't think.
they may not know what they need. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then a common, tip too, is I tell people like, hey, if you can't hear yourself or if you just feel like a little weird in the headphones, pull one ear halfway off to break the seal, and you're going to hear your voice in the room too beside yourself, and that makes a lot of people feel more comfortable. So
yeah, that's a good move. I record all my vocals with I have one off. I just like the sound in the room. So some people they have both on and they're fine with it, but like I've always felt more comfortable that way. So
totally
preference.
Like baking in that reverb or whatever.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Okay,
what is the
and then
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, sorry. Oh yeah, I'm thinking if I had another thing or two on vocals. Typically I'll like to try like a couple mics on somebody if I haven't worked with them before, just to see what sounds better and feels good. Like I don't have $1 million mic locker, but usually
what are they?
I'm trying out some new stuff that a buddy's lending me right now, which is cool. But for a while, like I used the Slate virtual mic for a while, just the condenser, and then I had an SM7B. So I'd see like, does someone sound better on either one of those? And then later I've used the M Audio Sputnik. It's like it's a tube mic that they don't make it anymore, but you can get one for pretty cheap, like $350 on eBay or whatever, Reverb. And that's a pretty sick tube mic if you want someone to like really cut through. But it does have kind of like it gives an edge to the voice, and it's pretty bright, so it's not for everyone. Yeah. But a lot of it for me, the microphone is about, okay, does this person have a bright or a dark voice? Are they thin or are they very like full already? And you kind of have to pick a mic with a quality that's going to balance out the way their voice is. So if there's a very bright singer that sounds thin or nasally, your bright mic is probably going to make it way harder to work with them in the mix than like picking something that's a little more just warm and dark. So
that's perfect. Cause
and I can also like ask them, what do you feel comfortable? Did you notice one feeling better than the other? And a lot of times they'll say, they'll pick the one that I'm also thinking sounds right. So when we're both in alignment on what feels good, it's like, okay, yes, I know we can like go forward really confident.
Yeah. I have a super bright voice. So like I sound good on SM58s, on warmer mics. But yeah, you got to pick a complementarian microphone, or else it's really just going to be like, why is this super muffled? And then you got to use 3 EQ plugins just to kind of get it, anywhere to sounding okay. I just bought the Slate virtual mic, the one you were talking about. So I'm excited to try that one out.
Yeah.
I've done a couple of test runs with it. It sounds really good, even just kind of off the microphone. So I'm excited to see what that one can do. But you don't have to break the bank with mics to get a good sound. Honestly, it's like good environment, good vocalist, good match. But it's like a couple $100 microphone actually can get the job done if you know what you're doing with it.
Yeah, totally.
Do you record in a booth, or what's your setup? Or do you have like a open space? Yeah.
So, my camera's not mobile here, but so those
no problem.
Panels behind me that you can see, they're hanging from the ceiling. So like my drum kit's there. I don't have like a vocal booth dedicated.
Sure.
I have other panels that, I will hang up on the other side of those, like in a kind of an L shape. And so I create like a little nook. It's basically like a V. What is it? It's a V that they're singing into, and then behind them is like another V opposing, and they can walk out the sides. So it's not like they're surrounded 360 degrees, but it's enough to really deaden it up. And that's what's funny is I actually used to have another panel I would hang like on their right side that so they were more enclosed, but I realized eventually that was just a waste of time taking it up and putting it down, because I couldn't really hear a difference with or without it.
No, it's
just
not,
wanted to make them more comfortable, having a little open air, but still kind of between two sets of panels, kind of enclosing them in a V, opposing V shapes works for me. And those are panels I had built over the years with, insulation and stuff, and sealed it all in.
Yeah.
So.
As long as like you get the vocalist to track somewhat close to the mic consistently, like I'm in like like there's wood panels everywhere in this room, but like unless you really kind of deliberately screw things up, you shouldn't have too much ambience problems with your microphone.
No.
You're kind of in a bigger room, putting up some panels should get the job done. Like I don't feel like a closed in box is like really that big of a deal in my opinion once you hear it in the mix, but that's,
I don't think so. Yeah, unless maybe it's like a rap track and it needs to be super dry and you're using a large condenser, which the other thing too is, if you don't have a bunch of treatment in your room, just using a dynamic mic will instantly isolate it way more than a condenser. So
yeah, I teach a lot of like people doing stuff in the home studio. I tell them get a SM58 or an SM7B, sing close to it. You're pretty much going to be fine. Like it's going to reject a lot of that nastiness. If you're not recording in like a small room in a house or something where it's like super echoey, but like if you do that, you should be okay. But yeah, condensers, it starts to get, you got to be a little more strategic about your placement of your microphone. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. In terms of like getting the vocalist in a headspace to record properly, is there any things you do? Do you get them to warm up? Do you let them do their own routine? How do you get them like mentally? Because I feel like the mental preparation and being in the zone is actually really important to getting a vibey recording. It's not just a technical thing.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So I will let them do whatever. If they have a warm-up routine they're used to, definitely have them go through that, encourage them to do that even ahead of time. Say, hey, like, yeah, you can warm up, sing through the song in the car on your way here or something if you want. Or I'll just let them go outside and run through scales and whatnot if they have that. I had one guy that his vocal coach has him blow bubbles through a straw into like a glass of water. So
okay,
whatever floats your boat, But at the least, then I have some people that don't really have like, as much training and they don't really have a routine. So in that case, I say, great, let's just take a couple warm-up passes through the song front to back. So we can get your level and I can, chart. I will chart out and make notes, I have a little like note sheet I take when I do vocal takes that we could talk about if you wanted, but I just want to let them run through it. So I hear all the dynamics, like what's the loudest part of the song, what's the quiet parts. And usually by 2 or 3 takes through that, they're naturally kind of feeling more warmed up and ready to go. And then usually I break it down section by section, unless it's more of like let's say it's like a more live band feeling track, like a blues rock thing or whatever. Sometimes I just have people crank through full takes and then we'll comp it. But normally I'll say, hey, let's go into the first verse and, we'll layer up maybe 6 good takes or whatever, 6 keeper takes, I think, or run 6 and I'll mark what the keeper ones are and then kind of move on section by section.
Sometimes you get some magic in those warm-up takes though.
Yeah, I do hit record on warm up too. Generally. The funny thing too, so for those singers that don't have like a formal warm up routine and they warm up on the song, sometimes they're not really warm in the first verse, even if we take like 2 or 3 passes through the song and then we do the first verse. So a lot of times I try and move on from the first verse quickly, like don't spend forever on it, because by the time we get to that chorus and go through the rest of it, if they have some juice to give, I like to run back to the first verse and say, hey, I know we already did like a few passes on the first verse, but like now that you're super warmed up, what happens if we just take a couple more runs at it and see if we get anything different that we like? And a lot of times those end up sounding better, more open and everything, because they're just so much more warm by having run through the rest of the song.
Yeah.
But I was going to say one thing for headspace and vibe too that I try and encourage is, like, I say, hey, I know there's a mic in front of your face. You have headphones on, maybe like you have them cranked or whatever, but I want you to sing like you're singing across the room to me over here. Or imagine you're on a stage in a coffee shop or a bar, and you're singing to the barista like in the back. So the idea of fill the room with your sound. It doesn't matter that there's a mic like a foot in front of you. You don't hold back, like I will work the mic so we pick it up, but don't worry about, you can't damage my gear by just singing.
Right, exactly. So are you
yeah.
running like a compressor on the way in and you're adjusting there? Are you adjusting on the interface? Do you do any of that while they're tracking? Or
Yeah. Let's see. The last probably 2.5, 3 years, I've used a compressor most of the time. Just like I have like the LA2A clone that Golden Age makes. It's really affordable, but it's like a just gentle, easy 2 knobs. You can't mess it up. Just to kind of like level it on the way in and it has a nice little character. But I recorded and then so I generally leave that set the same, and I'll just move my gain knob on my preamp that's going into that, whether they're loud or quiet, and I just try and get, let's say, 3 to 5 clicks on the needle. That's me what I'm comfortable tracking is just a little compression for bass, leveling. It makes them feel more confident in the headphones. It sounds better on playback when you hit it. Like I try not to have to put plugins on while I'm producing necessarily. I kind of like try and get a sound that feels good off the bat, but it's not so overcooked or slammed that, you can't do anything with it later. So that's like my take on it. But that's also like, I made most of my earlier recordings in my career, I did all just like on a regular interface, with no compression, or I recorded them that way, but then I think I like sent it through a compressor to their ears sometimes. But now I'm because I got a couple more pieces I actually like to track through. I do print it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that amount of compression is like inevitable at some point. Like you're gonna do that whether you do it on the way in or in the mixing stage. So
for sure.
What about like if you're in a session and it's just not happening? Like, have you had those where it's just like you're trying to get it to work with the vocalist and it's just not happening? Do you have them come back a day later? Do you have them take a break?
Oh, okay.
Have you experienced that? Or
yeah, sometimes obviously take a break is important. So I do remember, there was a band. We were actually doing an 8-song album. So short album, long EP, however you want to describe it. The first song we were doing vocals on, he ran through, we ran through the song, got takes, and I was just like, we were all, at the end of it, we all kind of felt like, I know you can sound better than this. Like you can have more energy. It just wasn't hitting. And we were just like, I think he finished and was a little bit in his head about it too. It was like, I think I was like too nasal and maybe I'm holding back, like trying to sound clean in the studio or whatever. And so, I mean, no worries. We got some stuff down. Like, let's just kind of take a break and do something else for a bit. And then, I'm trying to remember how I navigated. I tried to kind of like help him reframe his mind because he was a little bit in his head. I think he was a little worried about not being pitchy and stuff like that, which is a common pitfall. I think if people are worried about being pitchy or not being like clean and clear with their stuff, like the vibe and like your expression is that's what matters. I can touch up pitch.
Exactly.
This isn't you guys aren't even a pop band. Like if something's a little out, that could be cool. So, I think I might have just helped them come back and reframe it that way. I think I said, let's like turn off the lights this time or whatever. Like maybe you had the lyrics in front of you, like get rid of that. Like maybe a scenery change. Is something like that, or who knows? Maybe we didn't do this, but if someone's really in their head, I wouldn't be opposed to say, hey, why don't you come out here and like just grab that SM7 or that whatever. Let's just hold it in your hand and like rock out and like sing like you're singing on stage. Anything to get someone like reframe their position a little bit. So I think that's kind of a way out of it. But at the end of the day, on that session, I think okay, I remember what we did was, he says, yeah, I mean, I don't know if I feel like it was way better technically, but I felt like I was doing something. Like I felt like I was feeling it, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
And so by the end, what I did is we listened back to both versions, and I said, hey, let's listen back, but I know you're not like sold on it, but I think we actually like have an emotional performance now. Let's turn off the monitor screen and hit play and listen, like with our, you know, without that visual stimulus, because I think he was looking at the screen and stuff too, and like I was.
Right.
So let's just like turn off the screen and hit play and listen and see what we feel. And we turned off the monitor and listened back, and we were like, you know, it's not perfect, but we can, like, this is a vibe, and little parts here and there we can comp and fix it or punch in, and so from then on, he had the confidence for the rest of the songs. It was no sweat tracking vocals. I think it was that first song was a bit of like, oh, I'm going to come into the studio and I need to do a really good job and like not mess up, and it was just in the head. So
it's funny because like you're not just producer, you're group therapist. You know, you're a group psychologist, therapist, dad, or whatever you need to be to get the final product. You know, you have to get it out of them. You have to figure out how to make them comfortable. In my experience, it seems like guitarists generally have their stuff together, and unlike singing, guitar is like you can kind of just muscle through the performance. Singing, it's like your whole body's the instrument, so it's this very like dynamic thing. And the other one is, I feel like, have you had instances where the drummer comes in, you're like, oh boy, this is not even going to be usable? Or do most of the time your drummers have it together? Oh my, I got a reaction. Or because I feel like the skill variance with drummers is very wide. Some of them are just like, wow, this guy just got it. Or other guys, it's like, have you ever played to a click before? Like, I feel like that's what the spectrum is. So have you had experiences with that?
Yes. So yeah, if, you know, ideal situation is the drummer kills it, and that's pretty easy when that happens. But okay, the situations like I've had workarounds if someone can't do all the beat, like have all the hands coordinate for the right stuff that's tight enough and not flamming or being sloppy, or maybe doesn't have the speed for something. So a couple workarounds. One is recording like samples of the actual kit, and even for certain sections, which is like, you know, recording a few kick and snare hits and pop, 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 just dropping them onto the grid to make the beat, and then recording cymbals over it or something. Or I had a project where we did that for the groove, but then he came in and overdubbed Tom Phil's, you know, on the whole kit live. And you just, you know, you have to be good with your track management and session management and have some like templates set up to handle all those tracks and layers. But if you can manage it technically on your end, it gives you the freedom to do things like that. So yeah, or another one was, I had someone that was nailing, you know, most of the song, but there was a spot in the verse where, let's say, this like fast ride cymbal thing with the beat wasn't really clicking. I had them record, just, can you give me that ride cymbal just by itself? Just give me some eighth notes on the ride. And then like typically I'll hit a few samples of each drum before or after a song just to have them. And so I ended up rebuilding the beat off of that ride cymbal overdub and then my kick and snare samples. And it sounded like perfect in the final production with the rest of the parts that were played together. Yeah. So
you got to do what you got to do with that. Have you had instances where, you know, you need to kind of massage things with any instrument, but the performer's ego was not letting you achieve what you wanted to achieve? Or most times are people really cooperative when it comes to this stuff?
Most times they're pretty cooperative. Yeah. I'd say, yeah, I don't know if I've had I'll have to think about that a little more. If I've had like someone that was really a diva about something.
Guitar players mostly, probably what's
guitar players.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have had some people that said there will be no editing on this record, or
No editing?
something like that.
Wait, no editing at all?
No editing on the
That's
bass, and
no
I don't
editing
care
on
if
the
I have
bass.
to play it like 10. If I have to play it
Oh,
20 times, I'd rather do that than have it edited. But that
that's
person
fun.
later came back to me and said, I don't know why I was thinking that way. So
That's pretty
it
funny.
it is a thing that they grew out of. But yeah, for the most part, I think people are cool with me doing what it takes to get the sound. Or in the case of sometimes I don't tell somebody exactly what I'm going to do with what
Yeah,
the pieces they record. If we're going to piece together a drum part, I might just have them give me a few parts to say, hey, just want to have these in case I need to fill any, punch any holes or clean any
yeah,
parts out that helps me. And then I end up rebuilding something a little more substantial out of it. But I don't
yeah.
always tell them in a moment, because why there's no reason to bring the vibe down if you don't
Yeah.
need to. So
No reason to demoralize the band when you don't have to. You
no,
want to keep it. You want to keep the vibe up, of course. Yeah, you don't have to share all the information, but
yeah,
um, but that's good that people are mostly cooperative in that sense, because musicians are their own kind of creature, so it can be difficult sometimes to deal with that. Do you have instances where you're finishing mixes or masters or whatever, and you feel like it's at a good place, but then you get feedback from the band that is like complete antithesis to what you think it should be? Have you had instances where you're like, why would they want me to change it like that?
uh, not too much. I think in my early days of getting into this, it happened a little more. And as you do this, you learn how to better just communicate what people's goals are up front. And so I don't often have like, oh, that direction's really not the right direction. I'll try and um I'll try and I try and track things in a way too that, like, the vibe is mostly there. That in my mind, for when I'm tracking and producing something, I don't think the vibe should be a night and day shift from what they're
Mm,
hearing in the studio and to the first mix. If it's a night and day vibe shift, then something's way weird.
mm,
Generally, I feel like it's just like a bigger, better version. When I get the mix, it should be a bigger, better version of what they're kind of used to hearing. Um, and I prevent that too. And like I mentioned with vocals, I try and get stuff that sounds good without needing plugins on it just to play back. I don't really mix until I mix. I don't mix as I
okay.
go. I don't really rough mix. I like rough in faders, and maybe if there's a key effect or like a thing someone's looking for or asking for, I'll do it. But that's usually the extent of it, because
Okay.
I kind of don't want to make a rough mix that sounds too good before the actual mix.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
that's me, and that not everyone works that way, but I
Yeah.
found what works for me. Um, so it should sound pretty good faders up. But okay, and then in terms of like standalone mix projects where I wasn't producing or tracking, it's a lot of just asking for some references that they like, and not spending too much time on it before sending a first draft. Say, hey, maybe this is like 85% the way there, but this is a vibe check. Is this going the right direction?
Mm.
So yeah, in those
So you
cases, it's only a couple. Every once in a while, I've remixed something, I think, from scratch after sending the first thing. That's not always because they said it wasn't right. It's also once I realized, oh, I could do this better, or I
mm,
got a little derailed that day. So sometimes it's me. It's not even always them.
yeah, because sometimes from like the mix engineer mastering standpoint, sometimes people have the opinion that, well, I'm the audio guy, I know what's right, I should be able to tell the band what they want. And it's like, well, in the end, you're serving the band, right? It's like, it's not your
Mm-hmm.
job to tell the band what their artistic direction is. Almost, I mean, you're cooperating with them, but it's like, just because you understand how EQ plugin works doesn't mean you understand the band's artistic vision for their thing. So I think having like
Right.
that understanding is really good. So like when you
Yeah.
begin a mix, you probably have a rough balance. What is your first things you kind of go to when you start the mix process?
Yeah. So it's kind of kind of changes depending on the mood I'm in, I think, but it's probably guitars and bass or drums. And like a lot of people will solo up like a kick drum or whatever, or snare drum. I try not to do anything really in solo at the beginning, unless it's like dialing in a gate or something. I don't know.
Sure.
Generally though, like, yeah, starts with the rough fader balance, and like I know things are close. I'll probably just like listen to guitars and bass and drums, like get the rhythm section going. And sometimes I, clean up, tighten up the guitar and bass together a little bit on their own, then add the drums to that, and then try and
Really?
Yeah, I found so the guy that kind of does that a lot or mentioned it a lot was Bo Burchell, dude from Seosin. That
Okay.
he starts with guitar and bass, then like puts the drums in. I kind of do them together. Sometimes I'll do guitars and bass first. Sometimes I'll start on drums first, but I try and leave those three things playing at once for me to work them. But okay, my philosophy on it is that, like, why EQ a drum set in solo by just listening to the drums, when if you leave guitar and bass kind of going, you have a lot more, it guides you on how hard you need to EQ the drums anyways to like get them to punch.
True.
So I would find that I would just, if I EQ a drum set in solo and then put in the other stuff, I just end up having to go back and tweak the drums more once I hear the other stuff.
Yeah.
Like, it's too bright.
Do you have like things going on the master bus, like a compressor, or do you have a chain there? Do you engage in any top-down mixing sort of related stuff, or is that all last?
Not too much top down. I'll put on the mix bus compressor once I feel like I have the drums and bass and rhythm guitar somewhere in there. Like the basic rhythm section going, then I add it. But it's not a crazy amount. It just kind of like pulls it all together a little more. I do have it out when I start. Yeah.
I have a question about that because so I'm super big into top-down mixing. Obviously, different ways to get, you do a great job with your way, right? Different ways to get to the destination. I find it's really hard to get the snare drum balance correct if I don't have my compressor going on the master bus, because it's like that. It's doing a lot of that when the snare's hitting, but like when it's off, the snare's super loud. But then like if I put it in, then they're quiet. How do you just find a balance to make it work? I'm curious how you do it.
I think I've found a balance to make it work, because I have done more top down stuff for a while. I think when I took like this speed mixing course back in 2017 from Nail the Mix, actually, that was one of the tools in the toolkit, was they're like, start with a full on mastering chain and then like mix into that, and I start with like a limiter and a little bit of clipping on and a compression, and I could get decent results with that. But I would always finish the mix or like go to actually master it. Or if I was having someone else master, I'd take that chain off, and I would, like you said, that snare drum would just pop, like way above the mix. And I thought, okay, maybe it sounds good in the end, but is this really like the best thing for the music if without that stuff, all that stuff strapped across the end, it's not like holding together on its own before that. So then I think I have just found kind of a balance for me of getting things loud enough and like to pop enough out, but not too much that, and I don't do a lot of master bus compression. It's like 2 to 3 or 4 dB, maybe tops.
Yeah, that's what usually I tell people to do. Yep.
That way when it does go on, it's not really changing the balance too much. Just kind of tucking it.
It's just kind of like keeping that vocal from flying out, and then making sure the kick and snare are kind of like consistent. That's what I feel like the master bus compression does at the end. If it's like you feel like transients are getting squished, like when a chorus comes in and it gets like smaller, that's when
it's smaller.
It's too much. It gets it's definitely too much there. So like you start with guitars and bass, kind of bring in the drums. That's kind of cool. I mean, I haven't heard a ton of people start that way, but I think that's a good way to dial it in. And then it's kind of vocals and other things after that.
Yeah, kind of where my heart leads. Like I should say, I mean, I don't not ever solo stuff. I will solo up something. If let's say there's something about the drums is like the snare has like a weird sizzle that I don't like, or sometimes sizzle is a positive thing, but let's say there's a little like spitty sound. I will solo stuff to hunt problems, or say things just seem a little bit like murky. Like, can I solo all the drum mics one by one and see where that's okay? Sounds like that kind of like murkiness is in the overhead of the rooms. Then you do it. But I'm trying to not, live by the solo button too much. But yeah, that's for me. It's rhythm section and then all the other stuff kind of as it goes. And vocals are last. The other thing I like about doing vocals last is I can actually like take more of a break and walk away, or do them on a separate day. A lot of times I'll if I have something in my schedule, I'm like, I ran out of time to finish the mix. I just stop before doing any vocals, and then when I pick it back up at another time, your ears are really fresh, and you can just kind of get those vocals in there, and you'll instantly hear maybe one or two things to fix that you had before.
Well, because you're producing a lot of your own material, you probably really focus in the recording stage, getting it right. So when you come to the mix, it's like all the things you hate, you got rid of in that producing stage. So for you, it's just like kind of finalizing it up. When you get other people's tracks to mix, are you like, oh man, I wish I produced this because there's X, Y, and Z problem that I now have to get rid of or filter out or whatever?
Sometimes. Yeah, a lot. I mean, I think most of the mixing I've done for other people is like kind of more home recorded stuff. And so there's always like a level of prep that goes beyond, I'll not say always, but typically I'll probably be doing a little more editing as part of my mix prep than I might do if I had been tweaking all that stuff all along. But that could be anything from, you're gonna ask like what things would I normally.
What are like the top 3 home recorded stuff where you're just like, stop, like the 3 most common issues that you run into? I have them in my head, but I want to hear the ones you come across mixing. It's like another one of these where this mistake was made.
Let's see. I mean, a lot of it's just timing, tightness of performances for one, but that even shouldn't be a mixer's job to fix that. If someone's being asked to mix, unless, I've made deals more where it's like, hey, I'm going to do like the mix, but I'm also going to like charge a little extra because of, I need to do some more work to get it up to the best standard, or that I think this can be. And so I just kind of communicate that, so that then I know that I don't feel like resentment about having broke my back for this project and not getting compensated. But I'd say timing of things a lot, and guitars, multi-track guitars, just always there's really got to be like a good sense for tightness. And so I'm probably cutting and moving things when I edit more on tracks I'm sent like that. And I mean, sometimes pitch, sometimes people tune a lot, sometimes people don't tune much. Sometimes I tune vocals more if I'm just asked to mix the project. It kind of depends. But time vocal layer timing, honestly, too.
Yeah.
It's so hard to get your vocal layers in time, and sometimes stuff is sent that I'm just thinking, okay, well, it doesn't even sound like they sang the same thing twice the same way, where, if you're recording in smaller chunks and looping a section or just hammering repeated, you should end up with stacks that reasonably sit on top of each other. Sometimes I'm just like, they like held that one for 4 beats and they held that other one for 6 beats, and I'm just going to have to do a stretch. So
yeah, exactly. Or people don't pay attention, like when they're tracking their own stuff, how important just in general vocal timing is. Like, it's like, oh, well, it's in tune, it's performed well. And it's like, yeah, but if it's not in time, it sounds really amateur, like quick, even if the stacks are synced, but they're all not in time with they should be. You understand what I'm saying? Like,
totally. Yeah. Like You're saying the macro timing of, are all the vocals early or late, or are they
Yes.
in the pocket? Yeah.
Yes.
And I think a lot of that comes from getting a really solid lead vocal take that feels right. That's where I spend most of the time in producing. So all my background vocals and doubles get aligned to the lead take. And I use, like Vocaline or Revoice Pro in my case to do that. And so all you really need is one really solid lead take that you love the timing of and that feels in the pocket. And then all your other tracks you can kind of align to that. And when they're mixed in at a slightly lower level, that's, at least for me, that's how I kind of produce the vocals, is master align them all to the main one.
Yeah. A couple things I've noticed is tuning discrepancies between guitars, like a rhythm and then a lead is like sharper, or flatter, and it's like, okay, what happened with this?
Yeah.
Or the tone is just like, what were you thinking with this guitar tone? Or do they always send you DIs? I mean, I hope they do, or you might have to work
sometimes and sometimes not. So make the most of it. Yeah. I reamp sometimes, and sometimes I just have to kind of get creative with how you EQ something. I think I remember I have reamped an already amped bass once, or is that right? No, I think I put someone had only mic'd their bass rig, but it was just kind of thin and wimpy. I ended up putting it through a Sans amp pedal plugin, which just made it pop way more. So technically I did something that you would never do in real life by putting a mic'd amp signal through a pedal again, but it's just kind of what made it have some kind of like attitude in the mix. So it worked.
Yeah. Bass guitar tuning is another one where people don't think about, like when you play like the 2nd fret and then you play like the 14th fret or something of the same string, they're not going to have the same intonation, so it's like you got to tune to like the part you're playing.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Do you get vocals
or I have a real quick on that.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, a little bit of lag.
No, yeah, go for it.
Just to follow up the bass guitar thought too. Yeah, I often, this is my like style as a bass player, because that's my instrument I play most, but I try and avoid playing really above like the 12th fret for most things on a bass line, unless I'm playing chords or playing like a melody way up high. I always try and play, like, if it's the E string and you're getting up to that 12th fret, I should be on the A string by that point.
Yeah.
Because I feel like just the tone and tuning is so much more solid when you're in that bottom half of the neck. So
just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yeah. But anyways, do you have something else?
Do you get home recorded vocals where you're like, crap, this was recorded in an echoey room, we're gonna have to work some magic with this? Or do people usually find a way to get a decent take?
Right. Some of both. I think the one situation where it was the most roomy was on this like skate punk record that I mixed, that I ended up keeping the room sound. I tried like 3 different plugins that remove room, supposedly. And I didn't own any of them. I didn't own any of them either. So I was like, I had a buddy that ran one through like a Waves one for me, and I downloaded demos of a couple others, and none of them, like, they may have sounded cleaner in solo, but when I put it in the mix, they all lost some energy and bite that the original one had. So I ended up just keeping I said, hey, this is punk rock. This is okay. Like, like there's more aggression here and it sounds fuller. So, and I'm still like really proud of the mixes on that EP. So, and the band was too. So I think it's a judicial decision you have to make. And most of the other time I haven't had something that's terribly roomy. That I think people overthink maybe the amount of room that you can get away with. So, like we mentioned earlier.
Yeah. Like unless you're in a room with no like clothes or closets or anything, like it's just completely bare room, yeah, you're gonna get echo.
Yeah,
But like if you're a little smart about it, it's not usually that bad. I've
I
tried
agree.
using transient designers to like get rid of some of that room sound, but like you said, it's not natural. It's like not the
Hmm.
way the vocal's supposed to be treated. So
It lost
you end
something. Yeah, some of the
up,
body.
yeah, some of the body for sure. I'll start to wrap it up here. What is like your
Sure.
three? What is your go-to set of like plugins that you like to use, whether it's mixing or you're in the producing stage where you kind of have a collection that you like to go to? What's your favorite? I'm not
Hmm.
super big into like buying all these different types of plugins. I like having the
Cool.
tools that you know how to use and use them well. What do you use and use well?
Cool. Yeah, I'm the same way. I try not to collect plugins and like have a cluttered workflow.
No.
Uh, so I mean, I just use for like EQing. It's a lot of times a stock Reaper EQ
Mhm.
for surgical stuff, and
Oh, so are you in Reaper?
I use Reaper. Yeah,
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
I Reaper's awesome.
I guess I'm
I
surprised that hadn't
agree.
come up, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean the
Love Reaper.
stock Reaper plugin is great, and then just like the SSL channel strip from Plugin Alliance is the one that I use a lot. The BX 4000 E, that's the one I have, and their Focusrite one that they make too. That channel strip.
Yeah.
I tend to use the SSL one for all my instrument or guitars, bass, drums, and then I always run like vocals and keyboards on the Focusrite one. I can't really say there's a great reason why. I mean, they sound a little different, but they don't have like tons and tons of character. It's more
Mhm.
of, I think, a thing
Pretty
of
clean.
where the EQ bands are and like where the shelves are and the controls are placed tend to work well for me on those different sources just to kind of
Yeah.
grab what I need.
The SSL with like the 8K, 4K are just great for guitar and bass. I just love where those shelves are. They really
Yeah.
just kind of hit it in the right spots.
They're just easy to use. And then
Yes.
um I mean there's other EQs I'll pull out for certain things, but I do tend to, my mix starting template has most of the same plugins no matter, like from song to song my template looks pretty similar, and I keep a lot of the same things parked on the same sources. So like I mentioned, those strips. For vocals, usually it's, so some people like to dump on these, but the Native Instruments complete uh like mixing plugins from, I have like
Mm.
Complete 10, like a really old package of for their virtual instruments, but they also come with a bunch of those mixing plugins designed by Softtube. So I use like the 76, the LA2A,
Okay.
like on the vocals, the 76 that they make usually, or the Waves ones, the CLA, I've had those forever. I use that on like bass more, the CLA 76, then I think guitars, the LA3A, CLA3A.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and then master bus, I guess it depends on, like, I used the Townhouse SSL compressor for a while. And
Mm-hmm.
then recently I just got the native one when it was on sale for like $30, the SSL native bus comp. That's really great. It's kind of just a little more exciting and sounds a little more like pumpy and gluey, I guess, than the
Okay.
other ones I've
Yeah.
tried so far. But also one that people sleep on is the Very Comp as part of it's a Very Mu compressor. It's the Native Instruments one.
Okay.
That's the
Sure.
purple one. Pretty old,
Okay. All
but
right.
that makes it on most masters actually. And like as a
Okay.
group vocal, all my vocals kind of like lightly hit that. It's some nice tube color. So
Excellent. What about for ambience? What are you using for like delays and reverbs? Because the Reaper reverb kind of isn't very good.
oh
So
yeah. So funny enough, I do for sometimes if I so there's a great set of Bricasti uh, M7 impulses for free you can grab from some forum somewhere if you just Google.
okay. All right.
So I use some of those for like a hall reverb. Have some of those loaded into the stock Reaper IR
Oh, there you
loader
go.
reverb.
Perfect.
But no, I mean for like a plate, I a lot of times I'm using like the little plate from Sound Toys. I have the whole Sound Toys bundle.
Okay, those are great stuff. Yeah.
And then like Echo Boy, or sometimes just like the stock delay too, for if I want a cleaner delay. But I tend to have an effects section of sends always set up that has like, it has a plate, it has a hall, it has a room. Oh, for the room, I almost always have the Waves Abbey Road chamber going. And then like a dirty slap delay, which is, you can do that with almost anything, but
yes,
I have like is it the Manny American delay I have set to like a dirty slap. So, and then like a really long, I call it big ass verb. It's the RAUM plugin from Native Instruments, which was given away for free for a while. I don't think it still is, but that one's huge. It's kind of like, I liken to like a big sky pedal that guitar players would use. It's kind of like that style reverb in plugin form. You can crank it to like, you can go like 10, 20 seconds, and there's a freeze button if you want to freeze it and do some cool effects. So sometimes I automate on the freeze button to create some like tails and stuff, or pads. So
what about for tuning? Are you using
So most of the time Melodyne is the first thing. Okay, so I have kind of a workflow for tuning. So to back up, when I'm tracking a vocalist, a lot of times I will listen back through Waves Tune real time, just the automatic one, because I don't want to be distracted by little pitch things, and we can focus more on the vibe. When it comes time to edit the vocals and prep for mix, unless it's like a more pop or hip hop oriented genre, or somebody wants like a more tuned sound, I ditch the Waves auto tuner on the lead vocal and just go and tune it with Melodyne by hand, print it, get it really natural. And then all the backgrounds, doubles, harmonies, I keep the Waves automatic tuning on them. And then just there's always going to be a few notes that aren't hitting it quite right. I'll put Melodyne on in front of that in the chain to just correct whatever's not hitting right, and then print all that too. And I always save as, so I can just go back to an old version of my project if I need to fix a vocal.
Yeah.
But by the time I get to mix, that's how it's all tuned.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's a pretty solid workflow. Yeah, I mean, people have tried to like put out plugins where it's like it'll tune it properly without you drawing. I haven't found a way where you don't have to draw it by hand. Like it's just kind of the way it goes.
Yeah.
It seems, and because some need more adjustment than others, and because it's like, wow, that was off like almost a half a step, and some of it's just very little you're trying to rein in. So, that's just the way it goes, I guess.
You could go the Sam Pura route and just have the automatic plugin on the whole time, and tell the singer, hey, that wasn't right, sing it again, and get them to literally sing it until it hits the tuner correctly, and just never have to move that's another option.
That's you want to demoralize your singer. That's the option to go with.
Yeah.
But
I
like
love
you
Sam
said
actually. He's a really cool producer. Has like, he has a very like dialed in style, which, and he's very passionate. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. No, that's cool. But like you said before, it's like when you don't have infinite budget to record, it's like, give us a great performance with the vibe. If something's off in the tuning, we can fix that later. But you can't. There's no vibe plugin, that you can put on to make the singer sound like they're enjoying the performance. So, I feel like some of the tips, it's like, yeah, if you have infinite budget, of course you can do things like that. But it's like, you probably don't have 7 days to record one song for one of your vocalists or something like that.
No.
Maybe like if you're recording an EP, like a couple days to track vocals, like what usually is a couple songs a day?
Probably. So if I'm doing an EP with an artist, I'll also try and structure it so that we don't have to record all the vocals in one day. So, and nobody sounds their best singing in the morning. So it'd always be like instruments in the morning and vocals later in the day. and
Yeah.
try and spread it out.
Yeah.
But probably 2 to maybe 3 songs of like lead vocals, or maybe some backgrounds too, would probably be the average limit. So
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on. This was a great conversation. I love learning from people who are more experienced than me and giving out tips. So I'll put
it's a
all your links in
pleasure.
the description.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. I'll put all your links in the description. Where can people find you if they want to work with you?
sure. So, you can find me on Instagram at the Tyler Mays. I try and keep it really consistent, like artist branding. Like I've learned been frustrated with bands having URLs gone. So I try to find something that's the same everywhere. So the Tyler Mays on Instagram or TikTok, assuming that TikTok stays, which I think it will for now. We can probably knock on wood, but the Tyler Mays at Gmail or thetylermays.com. So
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks for coming on, and we'll see you guys next time.